some people say it's a 162 game season. It's a story that sometimes you don't know the end of the story to the end of the season.
That was Mario Alioto, the San Francisco Giants VP of Business Operations. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco. Every week on the podcast, we feature sports fans, writers, photographers, and other San Franciscans talking about living, working, and doing their thing here. It's a way to get to know your neighbors. Welcome to episode 28, part 1. In this podcast, Mario shares stories from his time at Candlestick Park, including his first gig with the Giants as a bat boy for visiting teams back in 1973. This episode is part of a series of podcasts we're doing over the course of the baseball season as the Giants celebrate 60 years in San Francisco. In case you missed it, go back and listen to episode 25 with Josh Keppel. Here's Mario.
I have to admit, I was a lucky kid. I grew up very close to Candlestick Park, and I started here when I was 12. I guess that was before the labor laws back then. But I was a bat boy. My brother was a bat boy for the year before, 1972, and really how it all came about is my dad had a linen route. He worked for a linen company, and one of his stops was the clubhouse at Candlestick Park. So my brother worked there, but he liked to play baseball. I just liked to hang out. I used to always go with my dad to pick up my brother. So in 1973, my brother wanted to do something else and play in his baseball team. So I was asked to be a bat boy. What's interesting about it, this was a bat boy for all the visiting teams, not for the Giants. So, I had some great memories back then. And I knew at the time I was lucky. I mean, these are the times of Pete Rose and Willie Stargell and Hank Aaron, Johnny Bench. I mean, think of all the teams, all the players that came through, Lou Brock. And I wore the uniforms of all those visiting teams. Wow. I always got booed when I wore the Dodger uniform. I do remember that. Sure. But my main story back then, besides being able to shag fly balls and all the things, I just was a lucky kid to be able to be there, is I remember in 1970, I believe it was 73, so I think that was Willie Mays' last year, but he was playing for the New York Mets. And his last game, so when the Mets came to Candlestick Park, his last game ever, because he was going to retire at the end of the year, was on a Sunday at Candlestick. It was in August. And the whole, everyone who was at the game that day came to see Willie. So right before the game started, if you remember at Candlestick Park, the visiting team had to come walk across the right field, come out of right field and walk all the way to the third base dugout. So Willie never came out for batting practice, and everybody was waiting. But right before the game started, he finally came out with, everybody starts cheering. And I was already in the dugout, waiting for the game to start, but he asked me to play catch. And I still remember that to this day like it was yesterday. And I remember I was 12, 13 years old. I was intimidated. So I didn't have my mitt with me because I brought it back to the clubhouse before the game started. So all I can find was a catcher's mitt that was in the dugout. And he said, "No, I'm not going to throw it that hard. You don't need a catcher's mitt." So I borrowed someone else's mitt. And I still remember to this day, but for me, it felt like it was throwing 100 miles an hour.
Of course.
But it was Willie Mays, and he's still here every day, and I still remind him of that story because it meant a lot to me as a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Had he been, at that time, do you remember had he been gone from the Giants more than one season? Or
yeah,
how many did he play with the Mets?
Not that long. You got to
69,
check me.
I want to say is his
No,
last
I
year.
think 70. Well, he was with us in 71 when
71.
we won the Western Division. So got traded in 72 for Charlie Williams.
Got it.
So this must have been August of 73, maybe 74. I think it was 73. Okay. But that was a big thing to me, but that was one of my bat boy stories. The other thing is, I before I moved to the front office in '83, and after I got out of college, I ran the visiting clubhouse for three seasons, 80, 81, and 82, which was a great. It was.
You're meeting everyone.
Oh, it was just something. I was 19 years old,
wow.
And the equipment manager at the time, the assistant equipment manager who was supposed to run the visiting clubhouse, was killed in spring training, unfortunately. And I read about it in the newspaper when I was at St. Mary's College. And the next day, Mike Murphy called me and said, "I need you to come back, and you want to run the clubhouse." And I thought, "Are you kidding? People do this for a living."
Right.
But I did that. Of course, I was going to school here in the Bay Area, but I ran that clubhouse for 3 years. And I remember some of the stories back then of teams would come in at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I had to be there with a couple of people unpacking those trucks.
Wow.
But one of the stories I had back then was I had two quick ones, and
sure.
And one of them was a lot of times when we were there late at night. You have all the equipment from all these players. I remember we'd get Pete Rose's glove and Johnny Bench's glove. We'd play catch at 4 a.m. in the clubhouse. I mean, that was fun as kids. Sure. That was one story. The other story I have is I remember this was it was yesterday. We were playing the Houston Astros. The Giants were winning, And my mom at the time did a lot, cooked for the team a lot. So I'd go to her house and pick up a roasted turkey, and she'd have it all ready to go. So I'd pick it up about the 7th inning or so. Anyway, the Giants were winning, and for some reason I got stuck getting back into the club. The game was going too fast, and no, it was the other way around. The Astros were winning, the Giants were losing. Bottom line is the Giants won in the bottom of the 9th inning. So the Astros were upset. They lost the game, and I couldn't get into the ballpark
to give them their turkey.
Yeah, to get their because you got to have the meal ready for after the game. So I came off the Candlestick Park exit, and I thought, well, I'll try to make my way in. So what I did is I ditched my car off the exit, got the 2 trays of turkey, started jogging with it, and I saw a policeman I knew. And he said, "What's going on?" I said, "I got to get in the clubhouse." So he put me in his squad car, put the siren on, and got me into the clubhouse.
Wow, emergency turkey.
Oh, God, I still remember that. And I remember walking into this. I mean, you can hear a pin drop in there. I felt so bad. But I got through it.
Yeah, and they got fed, I'm sure, delicious.
Absolutely. It was homemade cooking.
Homemade turkey.
Kidding? So that was fun. I was a lucky kid back then. I was there, and in 1989, that was the Earth. We were playing the A's, and we were... first of all, we were thrilled that we were in the World Series. Sure. I mean, it took a long time to get there.
Almost 30 years.
And I remember that day like it was yesterday also. A lot of these days, when you start thinking about it, it doesn't feel like all these years have gone by.
There's a theme
But
here.
we started we had 2 games in Oakland. We lost both games. Mm-hmm. So we came back to San Francisco down, 2 games to nothing. And that morning, my boss, Pat Gallagher, said, let's go. There, at the time, all the media would be at the media hotels. They had a breakfast for all the media. So let's go down to the Westin St. Francis. Let's have breakfast that day. Let's celebrate a little bit before we go to the ballpark. Right. And I remember that day because the vice president, Dan Quayle, was in town. Mm-hmm. And I remember being at the St. Francis, going up the elevator to the buffet, seeing all these sharpshooters on the top of the hotel. It's like, this is interesting. It's 90 degrees in San Francisco, which in itself, well, first of all, we were in the World Series, which was odd. For the time we were playing the Oakland A's, which was even odder, and then here we are at breakfast. It's 90 degrees, which is never 90 degrees in San Francisco. Nope. The vice president's in town. So anyway, we had a nice breakfast. So we go back to the ballpark. In that game, right before the game started, we had this great pregame ceremony, and I remember the time that I was on the field walking out through the center field gate, and out in center field, out in the parking lot, we had a big hospitality tent, and I think the earthquake was at 5:04. And I remember walking out because there was a bunch of high schoolers that were holding a United States flag, a big rolled up flag, and they were supposed to walk on the field for the ceremony. And as soon as the earthquake started, you can hear the rumbling, and those light towers at Candlestick Park. I remember the clinkety clank sound of those things, going back and forth, and you can hear some cement falling a little bit. But at the end of the few seconds that the ballpark shook, and it shook pretty well, everybody started cheering. Thinking this is a sign from heaven, and we were down 2 games and nothing. This is our time. Everybody started clapping.
Wow!
And then we realized later on, maybe a half hour later, how serious it was. And I remember there was up down by home plate, up a few rows up, there were a bunch of fans gathered around some other fan, and it was a Sony Walkman they had. And they were all looking at this little TV screen. That's when the first shot of that part of the Bay Bridge had collapsed, and you realized how severe what was really going on. It was quite the day, and one lesson we learned back then is that we didn't have a backup PA system. So it was a good thing the sun was still out, or else it would have been a lot worse story. One story I do have from that day, though, is that hospitality tent out in center field. I went out there. This is we were all waiting for a few hours if the game's going to be played or not. So I walked out there, and I saw Joe DiMaggio sitting. He was one of our guests, obviously a VIP guest, and lives in San Francisco. And the marina was on fire, or at least the street that his house was, or maybe a block away. And I remember at that moment thinking, there's Joe DiMaggio, one of the greatest players of all time, sitting there by himself, and thinking at that moment, all of us are the same. It doesn't matter if he's a Hall of Famer. It doesn't matter what I do for a living. We're all affected by the earthquake, evenly. And I don't know. For me, it was it was a very touching moment, and it kind of brings things in reality into perspective. Well, yeah. I mean, of course, now here comes the noise.
Oh yeah, the noise is good.
But yeah, we think about. I've been with the Giants for over 40 years, and if I look back at all the things we've done, the bobblehead craze or the phenomenon of bobbleheads is, for me, has always been something I look back on and said, my God, I can't believe after all these years that bobbleheads are still the number one promotion in sports. But it all came about as, those of us who grew up in, as kids in the 60s, when you went to a souvenir stand at a ballpark, really all you really had a choice to buy was a bobblehead, maybe a pennant, a program for the game, maybe a pencil with a logo on it, and maybe a keychain. I think that was about it. So, but I remember as a kid having a Giants bobblehead, just a generic player. So in 1999 was our last year at Candlestick Park, and we were trying to develop promotions that were appropriate to say, tell a goodbye to Candlestick for all those years. And I remembered we had a promotional meeting for all of our folks, everyone in the department, to come up with ideas. And one of the things I thought of was, I remember as a kid, the bobblehead, and my mom at the house I grew up at still has the bobblehead. And I said, why don't we give away a bobblehead of Willie Mays? I mean, Willie Mays is the greatest player of all time. He's a Giant, and let's figure out if we can find a supplier that maybe if we can afford it, which is always part of promotions in sports. They all sound good, but there's a price tag to them.
Were there already customized bobblehead that you knew of?
Not that we knew of.
So you didn't necessarily know that it was possible.
We didn't know that it was.
Probably.
Yeah, we figured if we can find a supplier, or one of our suppliers that we buy everything else from, if we gave the idea to them, can they come up with a prototype? So we gave them the idea. We maybe showed pictures of what old bobbleheads look like. So we wanted to look like Willie Mays. Here's a photograph of Willie, and the person that we went to had no idea what a bobblehead was, but they came back a few month or so later with a prototype. Said, I think we've got it. Here's what it looks like. And remember, bobbleheads as kids, they were like almost like Bob's Big Boy. It was a doll that was kind of chunky, and the head bobbles
Rotund.
on it. And in this bobblehead, the prototype was thin as a rail. It was a little tiny, like a statue with a little head on the top. And we said, no, that's completely wrong. It's got to be a heavy, more bulk to it. So they went back. They showed us another one, and we ended up doing that promotion. It was a Willie Mays bobblehead day. I can't remember exactly what the date was, but I knew that day walking around the ballpark that as soon as the reaction the fans had when they walked through the gates and got this box, and the box had some weight to it, that we had a great promotional item that worked, and people had a great time. Now, we didn't know that here we are in 2018, that's still the number one promotion in sports. But over the years, we've done bobbleheads every year. We've done bobbleheads that are not just players. We've done a Frank Sinatra bobblehead. We did a Crook and Kite bobblehead with a sound chip. Yes. We've done Tony Bennett bobbleheads, and I think what the message is those of us in the business side of the game, is that baseball fans aren't just here to watch baseball. We all have other lives and other interests. So if we can attract a fan to a ball game through one of their other interests, maybe it's a bobblehead of Carlos Santana, which we've done. It's just another fun way to do a promotion. So, but I will say that a few years after that, I was on a vacation in Italy, and I was walking in the Vatican, and I saw this outside the Vatican, and all these people selling things, and there was a huge table of bobbleheads, all of popes. And I thought, boy, we really got something started here.
Music for the podcast is by Otis McDonald, a.k.a. Joe Big Ale. Film photography is by Michelle Kilfeather. You can find Storied San Francisco on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All the episodes and Michelle's photos of storytellers are up over on our website, storiedsf.com. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review the show. You can reach us by email at storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening. Check back Thursday when we'll hear more stories from Mario Alioto.